She was just an 18-year-old girl with a broken taillight. But when she stepped into that courtroom, she met a judge who didn't see justice. He saw opportunity. What began as a traffic ticket turned into a secret affair, a hidden pregnancy, and ultimately, a double murder that would shake Alabama's justice system to its core. Nobody in Jefferson County ever questioned Judge Leonard Gaines. At 52, he was the embodiment of order and discipline. Sharp suits, polished shoes, a cold stare that made defendants tremble. For over 2 decades, he sat high on the bench inside the Jefferson County Courthouse in downtown Birmingham, Alabama, presiding over traffic tickets, assault charges, and family court disputes with an iron fist and a silver tongue. His public image was spotless. He lived with his wife, Cynthia Gaines, in a gated community on the west side of town, a pristine brick colonial with manicured lawns and a flag always fluttering out front. Cynthia, a respected real estate agent, often appeared by his side at charity galas and city council dinners. The perfect political couple. Leonard taught Sunday school twice a month, posed for photos with police chiefs, and gave commencement speeches at law schools across the state. To the outside world, he was more than a judge. He was the face of justice in Birmingham. But behind closed doors, the mask was beginning to slip. Long before he sat on the bench in Jefferson County, Leonard Gaines had learned how to manipulate power. Born in Selma, Alabama, the son of a Baptist pastor and a homemaker, Leonard grew up in a house where appearances meant everything. His father was strict, not just about God, but about control. "You're either in charge or you're being used," the old man would say. Leonard took that lesson to heart. By the time he was 16, he was already manipulating his way into student government and quietly blackmailing classmates with secrets overheard in locker rooms and late-night phone calls. At college, he dated the daughter of a state senator, not because he loved her, but because she opened doors. But it wasn't just charm that set him apart. It was ruthlessness. During his second year at the University of Alabama Law School, a rumor circulated. Leonard had forced himself on a freshman girl after a party. She reported it to campus security. But the charges disappeared, the girl dropped out, and Leonard walked away untouched. His fraternity brothers swore it was just a misunderstanding. No official report was filed. No action taken. Just whispers and silence. Later, during his clerkship in Montgomery, he was accused of forging billing hours on a pro bono case. Again, nothing stuck. A judge he'd interned for quietly resolved the issue. Leonard learned early that the law wasn't about justice. It was about leverage. He was good at projecting the image. Clean-cut, eloquent, fiercely articulate. But behind the scenes, he was always 2 steps ahead, aligning himself with political donors, backroom brokers, and law enforcement officials who owed him favors. By the time he turned 40, Leonard Gaines wasn't just a judge in the making. He was already untouchable. When he was appointed to the bench in Jefferson County in 2001, it wasn't because he was the most qualified candidate. It was because he knew the right skeletons in the right closets. And he made sure those skeletons stayed buried. Over the years, his rulings showed an unmistakable pattern. Mercy for the connected, cruelty for the vulnerable. Yet no one questioned him. The Bar Association praised his discipline. The papers called him a pillar of ethical leadership. But those who worked closest to him, especially young female clerks and assistants, began to notice things. A lingering touch, a locked door, a comment that made your stomach twist. Still, no one said a word, because Leonard Gaines didn't just interpret the law. He was the law, and as far as he was concerned, no one would ever be able to touch him. Whispers had circulated for years among courthouse staff. Some said Judge Gaines often called female defendants into his chambers alone. Others noticed his tendency to linger over certain cases that should have taken minutes. One former clerk, who asked not to be named, later told investigators, "We used to joke about it, but deep down I think we all knew something wasn't right." Still, nobody dared to question him. Not the clerks, not the lawyers, not even the other judges. Gaines was untouchable. His name alone could silence a room. That is, until February 17th, 2020, the day a broken taillight brought a teenage girl named Aaliyah Brooks into his courtroom. Aaliyah was 18, a senior at Carver High School. No prior record, no lawyer, just a scared girl standing alone in front of a man who held all the power. And from the moment Judge Gaines looked at her, something shifted. Court transcripts would later show that he ordered a $500 fine and a mandatory driver's education course. But what wasn't written down, and what no one could explain, was why he asked Aaliyah to stay behind after court was dismissed. Security cameras caught it all. At exactly 10:46 a.m., Judge Gaines led Aaliyah into his chambers, locking the door behind them. They re-emerged 47 minutes later. Aaliyah looked pale, shaken, her arms folded tightly across her chest, avoiding eye contact. What happened inside that room would remain a secret for a while. But that moment, that single meeting, was the beginning of a scandal so explosive it would destroy a career, shatter a family, and leave 2 bodies buried in the Alabama woods. The fall of Judge Leonard Gaines wasn't just a fall from grace. It was a long, slow descent into something darker, and no one, not even the people closest to him, saw it coming. Aaliyah Brooks had never been in trouble before. She was the quiet one, the kind of girl who kept her head down and her grades just high enough to avoid concern. At 18, she was weeks away from graduating Carver High School on the east side of Birmingham. Her dream was simple: to study nursing, get out of her neighborhood, and help her mother, Monica Brooks, who'd been raising her alone ever since Aaliyah's father left when she was 11. They didn't have much: a tiny apartment above a laundromat, 2 secondhand phones, and a car that rattled every time you turned the key. But they had each other. And for Monica, that was enough. Aaliyah's mistake, a busted taillight and no driver's license, should have ended with a fine and a warning. But instead, it led her into the private chambers of Judge Leonard Gaines. That day in February, she walked out of the courthouse different. Her shoulders sank lower. Her smile, already rare, disappeared entirely, and she stopped telling her mom where she was going after school. What no one knew was that Gaines had already made contact again through a prepaid cell phone he bought under a fake name from a corner store off Centerpoint Parkway. He texted her 2 days later. "Let's talk in private. I can help with your fine. You were very respectful." Aaliyah didn't respond at first, but curiosity and fear eventually wore her down. She texted back, and from that moment, the game began. They met at a rundown Econo Lodge on 3rd Avenue. Always the same room, always the same routine. Gaines never wore his suit. He showed up in jeans, a baseball cap, and sunglasses. He paid in cash. He never used his real name. Aaliyah, meanwhile, would arrive 15 minutes later, always checking over her shoulder, always hesitant. She started skipping classes. Then she quit her part-time job at the grocery store. Monica thought it was senior stress. She had no idea her daughter was being groomed by a man more than 3 decades older. A man who decided her fate in court and now demanded her silence in private. At first, Gaines brought gifts: a new phone, grocery money, one time, a gold bracelet with her initials. But soon the tone shifted. "You can't tell anyone. People wouldn't understand. I could lose everything." And Aaliyah, just a scared teenager in too deep, believed him. By late March, Aaliyah stopped eating dinner with her mother. She cried at night, but only when she thought Monica was asleep. When Monica asked if she was okay, Aaliyah would force a smile and say, "I'm just tired, Mama. That's all." But Monica knew something was wrong. A mother always knows. At first, she chalked it up to senior year stress. Graduation looming, college applications pending, life rushing in faster than her daughter could keep up. But the signs kept stacking. Aaliyah stopped singing in the shower. Her bedroom door, once always ajar, now stayed shut. Her laundry basket sat untouched for days. Unusual for a girl who used to fold her clothes like she was running a boutique. Monica started leaving little notes. I'm proud of you. You're stronger than you think. Whatever it is, we'll get through it together. She never got a response. One night in April, Monica knocked on her daughter's door and let herself in. Aaliyah was curled up, facing the wall, her body tense beneath the blanket. Monica sat beside her and gently placed a hand on her back. You want to talk to me, baby? She asked softly. There was a long pause. Then Aaliyah whispered, I'm just tired, Mama. But her voice cracked on that last word, and Monica felt it, not just in her ears, but in her chest like a warning bell. She wanted to press, to demand the truth, but something in Aaliyah's posture, that silent stiffness, stopped her cold. So Monica did what mothers do when they feel helpless. She made tea. She cleaned the kitchen twice. She stayed up late Googling signs of depression in teens and how to help her daughter open up. She didn't know the man who had once sentenced petty criminals by day was now haunting her daughter's life by night. She didn't know Aaliyah was carrying a weight no 18-year-old should ever bear. But she felt it. She felt it in the silence. She felt it in the sobs that came after midnight. And worst of all, she felt in the way Aaliyah stopped saying, I love you before bed. That was the moment Monica knew. This wasn't stress. This was something else, something darker. And she was losing her daughter one quiet, agonizing day at a time. But she wasn't tired. She was terrified. Her friends started noticing, too. She quit prom committee, skipped picture day, deleted her Instagram. One friend, Kendra, would later say she just faded out like she didn't want to be seen anymore. And then came April, the month everything changed. Aaliyah took a pregnancy test in the school nurse's bathroom. 3 minutes later, her world collapsed. 2 pink lines. No second chance. She was 6 weeks along. She didn't tell her mom, didn't tell her friends. She just sat on the bathroom floor until the bell rang, then walked out like nothing happened. But in her journal that night, she wrote just 6 words. I think I ruined my life. It was the man who stood in front of her in that courtroom and saw not a defendant, but a victim. And the deeper she sank, the more desperate she became to keep the truth buried. But some secrets don't stay buried forever, especially when they leave behind a child. December 12th, 2020. A cold drizzle blanketed Birmingham as Aaliyah Brooks was wheeled into the delivery room at UAB Medical Center. No father by her side, no birth plan, just her mother, Monica, clutching her hand, whispering that everything would be okay, even though neither of them truly believed that anymore. After hours of labor, a tiny boy with a head full of black curls entered the world. Aaliyah named him Jaden. The birth certificate listed only her name. When the nurse gently asked about the father, Aaliyah stared at the ceiling and whispered, I'd rather not say. From that day on, Aaliyah stopped being a teenager. She became a mother, and for a while, she tried to build a new life from the ruins of her silence. Jaden was a beautiful baby, healthy, alert, and quiet. But to Aaliyah, every little feature was a painful reminder of the man she was trying to forget. His nose, his skin tone, the shape of his ears. It was all him. Judge Leonard Gaines hadn't contacted her in months. After a final message in March 2020, this ends now. Never contact me again. He vanished. No support, no explanation, no acknowledgement. It was as if Aaliyah had never existed. But she couldn't erase him, not with Jaden's eyes staring up at her each night. So she said nothing to anyone, With no income and no support from the father, Aaliyah started selling her belongings online. Clothes, shoes, her old laptop. Every dollar went into a shoebox under her bed. Meanwhile, Monica took unpaid leave from her insurance job to help with the baby. She stretched her retirement account thin, pulling out $2,300 to keep them afloat. Still, bills piled up. Formula, diapers, rent. Everything cost too much. Aaliyah enrolled in online classes at Lawson State Community College, trying to keep her dream alive. But most Zoom calls ended with her camera off and Jaden crying in the background. Her professors left comments like, "Student seems overwhelmed. Needs support." The only bright spot was her father, Tyrone Brooks, who, despite living across town, started sending extra child support to help with the baby. He didn't ask many questions. He just wanted to help. But that changed the day he saw Jaden in person. It was spring 2022 when Tyrone ran into Monica and Jaden at a Piggly Wiggly off First Avenue North. Monica was pushing the cart. Jaden, now a toddler in dinosaur pajamas, was babbling and pointing at cereal boxes. Tyrone crouched down, smiled, and froze. He saw something. A flicker. A familiarity he couldn't shake. As they turned the corner into the frozen foods aisle, Judge Leonard Gaines appeared, shopping alone, a box of frozen dinners in hand. His eyes locked onto Jaden, and for a split second, pure panic flashed across his face. He dropped the box and walked straight out of the store, leaving his cart behind. Tyrone watched him go, something cold rising in his chest. He didn't say a word to Monica, but that night he started building a spreadsheet. But a spreadsheet wasn't enough. Tyrone Brooks needed more than suspicion. He needed truth. Solid, undeniable, dangerous. So he started digging. First, it was just public records, court dockets, hotel bookings, vehicle registrations. Tyrone combed through every date Aaliyah had disappeared for hours. Every Friday she had come home withdrawn. Every day she'd missed school. The overlaps were chilling. Then he paid $179 for access to a private online database used by insurance adjusters and used it to cross-reference Leonard Gaines's credit card charges. He found receipts. Econo Lodge, room 214, multiple stays. Gas stations along 3rd Avenue, timed closely to Aaliyah's sudden absences. Prepaid burner phones. It painted a pattern, a routine, a predator's schedule. Still, he knew it wasn't enough to take to police. Not yet. Not against a man like Gaines. So he upped the stakes. He hired Kevin Morris, a retired Marine turned private investigator who had worked on warehouse theft cases for Tyrone's company. This time, Tyrone didn't just ask for surveillance. He said, "I need you to find out what kind of man this judge really is." Morris didn't blink. "I'll be discreet. But if this is what I think it is, you're going to need more than pictures. You're going to need courage." Over the next 4 weeks, Morris trailed Gaines like a shadow. He parked down the block from Gaines's home, monitored his comings and goings, tracked his nighttime stops. He noticed a pattern almost immediately. Gaines would often leave his home between 10 p.m. and midnight, driving aimlessly, or so it seemed. But Morris saw him pull into empty parking lots, pause at red lights for minutes at a time. One night, Morris caught a glimpse of him sitting his car outside a local strip mall, just staring at nothing. Another night, he snapped a photo of Gaines tossing a plastic bag into a private dumpster behind his self-storage facility. Morris retrieved it hours later. Inside were shredded receipts, a half-burned prepaid phone card, and a hotel key card. It was getting darker and closer. Then things turned. One morning, Tyrone came home to find his mailbox smashed open, its contents soaked in what smelled like motor oil. His car's windshield had a long scratch across the passenger side. Not deep, but intentional. Morris called later that day. "You're being watched now? I found a white Toyota Camry parked across from your building 3 nights in a row. Tinted windows. Alabama government plates. Tyrone froze. You think it's him? I think it's someone who wants you scared. But Tyrone didn't scare easily. He made copies of every document, every screenshot, and hid them in 3 separate locations. One with his lawyer, one with Monica, and one in a waterproof box behind the old tool shed at his mother's place in Ensley. He'd seen what Gaines looked like when he panicked. Now he wanted to see what he looked like when the truth came knocking. Tyrone wasn't stupid. He'd worked in logistics for 20 years. His brain lived in columns, timelines, and facts. He marked the day Aaliyah appeared in court. He counted back the weeks of her pregnancy. He matched up the date of Jaden's birth. Then he compared all of it to Judge Gaines's court docket and hotel stays. Public records, easy enough to access if you knew where to look. What he found made his stomach turn, and it made him furious. Back in his apartment, Tyrone pulled out a cheap digital recorder he bought from an electronics store. He didn't tell Aaliyah. He didn't tell Monica. He just made an appointment, as a concerned parent, to meet with Judge Gaines at the courthouse. When they sat down in a small conference room, Tyrone pressed record in his pocket and calmly asked, "Do you remember my daughter, Aaliyah Brooks?" Traffic case, February 2020. Gaines's voice was steady, professional. "I see hundreds of cases, Mr. Brooks. I couldn't possibly remember the specifics of your daughter's violation." But his eyes flickered. His hands fidgeted. That afternoon, cell phone tower records placed Gaines making 3 calls to his attorney from the courthouse parking lot. He was scared, and Tyrone knew he had just hit a nerve. The secret had stayed buried for over 2 years. But now someone was digging, and Leonard Gaines, the man who built his life on control, was about to learn what it felt like to lose it all. Summer 2022. The heat in Birmingham was relentless, but the tension in the Brooks household was worse. Aaliyah had grown thinner, her eyes hollow, her steps slower. The pressure of motherhood, college, and the crushing weight of her secret were eating her alive. Even Monica, though still in the dark, knew something was unraveling. Her daughter had changed. Not just tired, but paranoid, restless, distant. But Aaliyah had no words left, only dread, because someone had started texting her. It came at 2:47 a.m. from a number she didn't recognize. A burner phone. "Your father needs to stop asking questions. Think about Jaden's future." That was it. No name, no threats of violence. But the message was clear, and the timing couldn't be ignored. It came just days after her father's secret meeting with Judge Gaines. Aaliyah stared at the screen until the battery died in her hand. Over the next 6 weeks, the messages became more frequent and more menacing. August 28, 1:15 a.m. Curious fathers sometimes lose their jobs. Manufacturing plants have accidents. September 3 to 11:52 p.m. Your community college funding could disappear with one phone call. September 17 to 3:24 a.m. Social services takes interest in unstable young mothers. By now, Aaliyah was unraveling. She'd pace in the parking lot outside their apartment for hours at night, whispering into her phone, crying silently, clutching her arms like they were the only thing holding her together. Monica thought it was postpartum depression, but Jaden's father had come back into her life. Not with love, but with poison, and she was choking on it. He'd gone deeper than ever. The private investigator he hired, Kevin Morris, was now trailing Judge Gaines day and night. From April to September, Morris documented everything. Gaines visiting the same Econo Lodge where he'd once met Aaliyah, meetings with other young women, extended lunch breaks, nighttime visits to a law firm downtown. Morris snapped photos, logged vehicle movements, captured timestamps, and then he intercepted a message. Through illegal gray area software that traced SMS pings, Morris confirmed one of the threatening messages to Aaliyah had come from a cell tower near Judge Gaines's home, within a 10-minute window of his car, pulling into the driveway. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was evidence. September 22nd, 2022. Aaliyah sat in her car outside Little Sprouts Learning Center, staring blankly ahead, her hands trembling around her phone. Jaden was inside, finishing daycare, dressed in a t-shirt with cartoon dinosaurs and gripping his favorite stuffed giraffe. She couldn't move. For 45 minutes, she sat frozen. Inside the center, a staff member named Rebecca Chin noticed. She just sat there, Rebecca would later tell investigators, like she was bracing for a hurricane no one else could see. That week, her supervisor at work, Janet Martinez, filed 3 incident reports. Panic attacks, missing shifts, crying in the break room. And still, Aaliyah told no one. Because she had a plan. She wasn't going to run. She was going to fight back. October 1st, 2022, Aaliyah walked into the Redstone Credit Union on 4th Avenue and withdrew $3,427, everything she had. Security footage shows her hands trembling as she signs the withdrawal slip, tears clinging to the corners of her eyes. Then she walked to a nearby 7-Eleven, bought a prepaid phone, and stepped into the alley behind the store. There, she composed a single text and hit send. 11:42 p.m. I have copies of every hotel receipt, every message, every photo. Either you start supporting your son, or everyone sees them. Attached, a picture of Jaden at his 2nd birthday. The resemblance to Judge Gaines was undeniable. 3 hours later, the burner phone buzzed. Gaines had replied, "You're making a serious mistake." But it was too late. Aaliyah had gathered months of evidence. Hotel receipts from dumpsters, screenshots of old messages, ATM camera stills of Gaines withdrawing cash before their meetings. She wasn't bluffing. She was done being scared. For over 2 years, Aaliyah kept his secret. Now, she was ready to burn it all down. But in trying to hold a man like Judge Leonard Gaines accountable, she didn't realize just how far he was willing to go to keep his mask intact. October 5th, 2022. The sun had barely risen over Birmingham when Judge Leonard Gaines sat alone in his car outside his law office, staring at a text that refused to go away. I have everything. You support your son, or everyone finds out. She had attached another photo, Jaden in his Halloween costume, dressed as a baby judge, gavel and all. It wasn't a threat. It was a line in the sand. That morning, Gaines canceled court proceedings for the rest of the week, citing medical reasons. He didn't look sick. He looked cornered. His credit card records would later show a flurry of transactions. A $2,000 payment to a reputation management firm. Multiple withdrawals totaling $15,000 in cash. A late-night consultation with a defense attorney. And a single $5,000 payment to a man named Marcus Reynolds, a private investigator known not for uncovering truths, but for making problems disappear. Gaines wasn't trying to protect Jaden. He was trying to protect himself. By now, Aaliyah Brooks had put everything in writing. Monthly payments of $2,500. Coverage of all medical and daycare expenses. A college fund in Jaden's name. A signed paternity acknowledgement. And most damning of all, a written apology. She sent it on October 12th with a chilling note. You have until the end of the month. After that, every news outlet in Alabama gets the story. Your wife, your colleagues, your church, everyone. It was bold. It was dangerous. But Aaliyah believed the truth was her shield. Judge Gaines was unraveling. Court clerks noticed his erratic behavior. His wife, Cynthia, recalled him coming home late, talking to himself, checking the windows at night. He started sleeping in his home office. Paranoid, angry, afraid. And yet, he never answered Aaliyah's demands. October 15th, 2022. Aaliyah sent one last text from the burner phone. You have until the 31st. Then I go public. Jaden deserves to know his father. And the world deserves to know who you really are. No reply. Just silence. But someone was watching. Tyrone Brooks continued gathering evidence. He now had hotel check-in times, ATM photos, phone records, and video of Gaines meeting with multiple other women, all barely of legal age. He was preparing to go to the press. And Gaines knew it. That same week, Marcus Reynolds, the fixer, was seen outside Aaliyah's apartment complex, sitting in a black SUV, engine idling, watching. But they weren't the only ones watching. Across town, a young reporter named Tamika Ellis, who worked for the Birmingham Voice, had started connecting the dots. She'd been covering a string of missing persons cases and noticed something odd. Aaliyah Brooks's name never made it past the local police blotter. No press conference, no citywide Amber Alert, no official comment from the court. And when she reached out to request a statement from Judge Leonard Gaines about his knowledge of the missing mother, her inquiry was ignored. That silence piqued her curiosity. Digging deeper, Tamika found the docket from February 17, 2020, Aaliyah's court appearance. The transcript was unusually short, vague. No lawyer present. No witness statements. But what stood out most was the time gap. Court adjourned at 10:38 a.m., but Gaines didn't log out of his judicial chambers until 11:33 a.m. What happened in those 55 minutes? Tamika filed a public records request for courthouse surveillance from that morning. While much of it was redacted, one thing was clear. Aaliyah entered the judge's chambers with him, alone. She started asking around. Clerks, bailiffs, custodians. Everyone was tight-lipped, but one retired court assistant, speaking anonymously, confirmed what others wouldn't. He's been calling young women into that office for years. We all knew. We just didn't say it out loud. By mid-October, Tamika published an anonymous expose online titled, "The Judge, the Girl, and the Silence. What Happened to Aaliyah Brooks?" Within 48 hours, it had been shared over 30,000 times. Social media lit up. Hashtag Justice for Aaliyah started trending on Alabama Twitter. Protesters gathered outside the Jefferson County Courthouse, demanding transparency. Even students from Carver High School held a candlelight vigil for Aaliyah and Jaden. Though their bodies hadn't been found yet, many feared the worst. Tamika's inbox overflowed with messages from women. Some claimed they too had once appeared in Gaines's courtroom and had been invited to speak privately after sessions. Most never spoke up, scared of retaliation, or worse, disbelief. Now they had a name, a face, a story, and the wall of silence was cracking. Inside the courthouse, tension grew. Judges looked over their shoulders. Attorneys whispered in hallways. Clerks began requesting transfers. No one said out loud, but everyone knew. The house of cards was starting to collapse. Despite the threats and the fear, Aaliyah seemed lighter. Her daycare provider, Rebecca, remembered her smiling again. She mentioned enrolling Jaden in the advanced toddler program starting in January. She even joked about dressing him up as a lion for Thanksgiving. Maybe she believed the worst was over. Maybe she thought he'd finally pay up. She had no idea he was preparing something else. December 15th, 2022. At 6:30 p.m., Aaliyah picked up Jaden from Little Sprouts Learning Center. He wore dinosaur pajamas, clutched his favorite stuffed giraffe. She told the staff, "We've got a meeting tonight. Something important. Wish me luck." At 7:42 p.m., she left her apartment with Jaden in her arms. Her final message to her mom read, "Meeting someone about help for Jaden. Don't wait up." She was never seen alive again. GPS data from her phone showed her driving east toward Charles City County into a wooded area off Route 5, an old logging road. No lights, no cameras. At 8:03 p.m., A license plate reader caught Judge Gaines's BMW X5 heading in the same direction. At 9:47 p.m., it returned. Alone, he avoided toll roads, avoided highways, avoided being seen. But what he couldn't avoid was the evidence he left behind. Aaliyah thought she was meeting the father of her child to demand what was fair. She brought proof, purpose, and hope for her son's future. Instead, she walked into a grave, and Jaden walked in with her. January 8th, 2023. It had been 24 days since Aaliyah Brooks and her 2-year-old son, Jaden, vanished. Their names barely made local headlines. Just another young mother and child who disappeared without a trace. Police said they had no leads. Monica Brooks said they weren't looking hard enough. But that cold winter morning, a man named Michael Thompson, an amateur hiker from Richmond, pulled a truck off Route 5 near a narrow gravel turnout. He was looking for deer trails. What he found instead would haunt the state of Alabama for years. At 10:17 a.m., Michael made a 911 call, his voice calm but shaken. "I'm on the old logging trail off Route 5, about a quarter mile in. There's 2 bodies, a woman and a child. Looks bad, real bad." When deputies arrived 20 minutes later, they found the scene just as he described. The woman, partially covered in pine branches. The child's small body lying just feet away. A stuffed giraffe soaked in blood between them. Tire tracks, deep and chaotic, marked the dirt beside them. It was Aaliyah and Jaden. And what the forensics would later reveal would send shockwaves through every courtroom in Birmingham. The medical examiner's report was devastating. Aaliyah had defensive wounds on her arms and hands. DNA under her fingernails matched Judge Leonard Gaines with 1 in 1 billion certainty. She had been strangled, likely during a violent confrontation. Her wallet, phone, and all documents were missing. Jaden, just 2 years old, had no external injuries. He died of asphyxiation, most likely smothered. Forensic psychologists believed he had been killed after witnessing his mother's murder. On his wrist was a small gold bracelet engraved with Jaden, a gift from his grandmother Monica. It had been ripped off, found crushed beneath the rear seat mat in Gaines's car. FBI evidence response teams combed the site for 5 days. What they found included tire treads matching the unique wear pattern of Gaines's BMW, fibers from Jaden's pajamas under the car's front passenger seat, a partial fingerprint on Jaden's sippy cup, Judge Gaines's left index finger, blood traces in the carpet of the BMW cargo area, both victims' DNA. But the most damning find? A small black envelope placed at the makeshift memorial that formed days later, containing printed emails between Gaines and his attorney. Subject line: permanent solutions to temporary problems. The envelope had no sender, but surveillance footage from a local camper's trail cam showed a man in a trench coat, face obscured, placing it quietly, then vanishing into the trees. When Monica Brooks was shown her daughter and grandson's clothing for official identification, she collapsed on the floor and had to be hospitalized. Her sobs echoed through the station. Tyrone Brooks didn't cry. He called his private investigator, Kevin Morris, and handed over every file, every recording, every photo he had compiled. "Take this to the police," he said. "It's time." Within 48 hours, a joint task force was formed, including the Birmingham Police Major Crimes Unit, FBI Special Agent Marcus Chin, and forensic analyst Dr. Elena Rodriguez. They met inside a makeshift command center at RPD headquarters on Gray Street, and they had one target, Judge Leonard Gaines. January 10th, 2023, 9 a.m. Gaines walked into the interrogation room in a tailored suit, calm, collected, the same way he'd looked down on defendants for years. When asked about Aaliyah, he said, "She appeared in my courtroom once, for a minor traffic violation. That was the extent of it. But when agents pulled out cell phone tower logs, placing his burner phone at the crime scene, when they showed him traffic camera footage of his car on Route 5, when they presented fiber evidence, DNA samples, and Jaden's crushed bracelet, his hand began to tremble. He asked for his attorney and fell silent. 2 days later, during a court-ordered search of his home, agents opened a hidden safe behind a bookshelf in Gaines's office. Inside, they found the burner phone used to threaten Aaliyah, $25,000 in cash bundled with bank bands, surveillance photos of Aaliyah and Jaden, illegally obtained medical records from the hospital, and then, behind the spare tire in his BMW, they found a shredded pajama sleeve, matching the set Jaden had worn the night of his death. The truth was no longer buried in the woods. It was printed in lab reports, captured in digital records, and burned into the memory of a city that had once trusted a man in a black robe. But the fall of Judge Leonard Gaines was just beginning. Next came the courtroom, and there, in front of the world, he would be forced to hear the names of the people he tried to erase. June 15th, 2023. The Jefferson County Courthouse hadn't seen a crowd this large in decades. Camera crews, protesters, retired judges, law students, families with strollers. Everyone wanted to witness what was being called the trial of the century. At the center of it all stood a man once known as Judge Leonard Gaines, now an inmate in an orange jumpsuit, shackled at the wrists, facing 2 counts of first-degree murder, statutory rape, witness intimidation, obstruction of justice, and official misconduct. He entered the courtroom not through the judge's chambers, but through the back door reserved for defendants. The lead prosecutor, Catherine Martinez, stood before the jury, her voice steady and firm. This is not just the story of a man who killed a woman and her child. This is the story of a judge who wore a robe by day and became a predator by night. He silenced his victim. He smothered his own son. And he did it all to protect his reputation. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Even the jury, 12 men and women from across Alabama, looked stunned. Tyrone Brooks was the first to take the stand. For 6 straight hours, he walked the jury through every detail. The court date, the spreadsheet, the meeting with Gaines, the private investigator, the late-night text Aaliyah never showed anyone else. His voice cracked when he described seeing Jaden in the grocery store. I knew in my gut. That boy had his face. That panic on Gaines's face when he saw him, that told me everything. Next came Monica Brooks, trembling, holding back sobs as she described the night Aaliyah and Jaden left the apartment for the last time. She brought with her Aaliyah's journal, found hidden beneath a drawer in her old bedroom. She read from one entry, her voice breaking. He says no one will believe me, that I'll ruin his career. But Jaden deserves to know who his father is. I don't want to be scared anymore. No one in the courtroom moved. Even the defense team sat in silence. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the medical examiner, gave cold, brutal clarity to the horror. Aaliyah had been in a struggle for her life. Broken fingernails, bruising on her arms, signs of asphyxiation. Jaden had died watching his mother die, likely crying, until a pillow or bare hand silenced him forever. Blood from both victims was found in the cargo lining of Gaines's BMW. As she described Jaden's condition, 3 jurors wiped away tears. One woman in the gallery sobbed audibly. But no one expected the moment Cynthia Gaines, Leonard's wife of 23 years, walked to the witness stand. Wearing all black, hands folded tightly, she sat down and said just one sentence. The night Aaliyah and the baby went missing, Leonard came home late, covered in sweat, and burned his clothes in our fireplace. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, murmurs. One juror put their hand to their chest. Judge William Marshall called for order, banging the gavel 3 times before silence returned. Cynthia continued. He wouldn't speak to me, wouldn't look at me. I went into the garage the next morning. There was mud on the tires, pine needles stuck to the bumper. The prosecution presented a final piece of evidence, a recorded voicemail left on Aaliyah's burner phone. The timestamp, 2:12 a.m., December 16th, just hours after her death. You should have left this alone. You pushed too far, and now there's nothing left to save. The voice was undeniably Gaines's. And in that moment, whatever doubt the jury might have had disappeared. The mask was off. The robe meant nothing. And the man who once sentenced others was now awaiting his own. But outside the courtroom, the fallout was only just beginning. In the days following the verdict, Jefferson County was on fire, not in flames, but in outrage. Dozens of former defendants and courthouse staff came forward with disturbing stories. A retired public defender named Martin Clay wrote an open letter published in the Birmingham Times, stating, "For years, we watched Judge Gaines hand out harsh sentences to poor black youth for minor infractions while letting white-collar criminals walk free with a smile and a handshake. We thought it was bias. Now, we know it was something far more dangerous. It was a cover." His words went viral. In barbershops, churches, and local talk radio shows, everyone had something to say about the judge. Then came Shanice Walters, now 26, who, in a live Facebook video viewed over 200,000 times, said that she too had once been called into Gaines's chambers alone at 18. Her story echoed Aaliyah's. A traffic violation, a private conversation, gifts, then silence. "I thought it was just me. I was ashamed for years," she said through tears. "Now I know it wasn't my fault, and I wasn't alone." Civil rights attorneys began reviewing past cases presided over by Gaines. Over a dozen motions were filed to reopen judgments where victims now claimed coercion or inappropriate conduct had influenced sentencing outcomes. A petition to establish an independent oversight board for Alabama's judicial conduct hit 150,000 signatures within days. Meanwhile, students from the University of Alabama School of Law held a silent protest, all wearing black robes with red tape across their mouths, symbolizing the years of enforced silence. The state Supreme Court issued a statement calling the Gaines case an institutional failure and vowed sweeping reforms. But many saw it as too little, too late. Monica Brooks, though still reeling from grief, appeared on Good Morning America to say just 6 words. He wore the robe to hunt. Her voice, calm, solemn, shook the nation. She wasn't just a grieving mother anymore. She had become a symbol, and her pain had become a movement. All that was left was Judgment Day, July 12, 2023. The jury filed back into the courtroom after just 4 hours of deliberation. Some wore tight expressions. Others avoided looking at the defendant. One woman clenched a tissue in her fist, damp, shaking. Leonard Gaines, once a towering figure in Alabama's judicial system, sat at the defense table, pale, hunched, eyes glassy. His suit was replaced with a county-issued jumpsuit. His wedding ring was gone. His power evaporated. The judge asked, "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreman stood. "We have, Your Honor." The courtroom held its breath. Count 1. First-degree murder of Aaliyah Brooks, guilty. Count 2. First-degree murder of Jaden Brooks, guilty. Count 3. Statutory rape, guilty. Count 4. Witness intimidation, guilty. Count 5. Obstruction of justice, guilty. And then came the words that brought the Brooks family to tears. "We, the jury, recommend life in prison without the possibility of parole." 1 week later, in a courtroom packed to the walls, Judge William Marshall gave the sentence that would define the legacy of Leonard Gaines. "You were not just a predator. You were a man entrusted with the law, and you used it to hunt, deceive, and destroy. You killed a young mother who trusted you. You smothered your own son to keep your image intact. You silenced innocence to preserve ego. He paused. Looked Gaines dead in the eye. This court sentences you, too. Life without parole for the murder of Aaliyah Brooks. Life without parole for the murder of Jaden Brooks. An additional 20 years for statutory rape. Gasps filled the room. Some wept. Some clapped. Gaines said nothing. He was led away in chains. But the moment that stayed with everyone, the one that made national headlines, came after the sentencing, when the judge allowed Monica Brooks to speak directly to the man who killed her daughter and grandson. She stood. Her hand shook, but her voice did not. You didn't just kill my baby and her baby. You killed their future. You killed my joy. You killed my faith in everything I used to believe in. The courts, the robe, the law. She pointed at Gaines, now standing with his head down. But now, the world knows what you are. And every time you close your eyes behind bars, I hope you see my daughter's face. And I hope she haunts you for the rest of your miserable life. Silence gripped the courtroom. Then came thunderous applause. Cynthia Gaines filed for divorce the following month and moved out of state. Tyrone Brooks created a scholarship fund in Aaliyah and Jaden's name for young single mothers in Alabama. Monica never returned to her job. She started volunteering with missing persons advocacy groups instead. The bench once held by Leonard Gaines was permanently retired. A plaque now hangs in the courthouse lobby, reading, "Justice must not only be served, it must be worthy of the people it protects." She was just a girl with a broken taillight. He was the judge who thought no one would believe her. But in the end, the truth was louder than the law. The robe couldn't save him, and the gavel couldn't hide what he'd done. 6 months later, Birmingham was quieter, but it was not the same. The Jefferson County Courthouse still stood tall, its steps now worn by months of protests, vigils, and quiet acts of remembrance. Where reporters once crowded to get a glimpse of a disgraced judge, now stood a small memorial. A framed photo of Aaliyah holding baby Jaden, a single white rose placed beneath it each morning by an anonymous visitor. No one ever saw who left the flowers. Some say it was Monica. Others say it was Tyrone. But maybe it was all of them. Monica Brooks never returned to her job at the insurance office. She turned her apartment into a community outreach space where young women could come and talk, no questions asked. She named it Jaden's Light. It's not just about grief, she told local paper. It's about making sure no girl ever walks into a courtroom alone again. Every Wednesday, she taught a free workshop called Know Your Rights, open to any teenager who had ever been ticketed, profiled, or made to feel powerless in the face of authority. Tyrone Brooks, ever methodical, launched the Brooks Foundation, a scholarship program for young single mothers pursuing degrees in healthcare and law. The first 2 recipients received full rides to Alabama State University. He kept Aaliyah's spreadsheet, framed it, hung it above his desk, not as a trophy, but as a map that led to truth. He called it the evidence of love. Tamika Ellis, the journalist who broke the story, was nominated for a National Journalism Award, but she declined an offer from CNN. "This story doesn't belong to the nation," she said. "It belongs to Birmingham." As for Cynthia Gaines, her divorce was finalized quietly. She moved to Savannah, Georgia, changed her name, and gave a rare interview to Southern Woman magazine, where she said only one thing about her ex-husband. "He fooled everyone, even me. I slept beside a monster for 23 years. She now works as a librarian and volunteers with victims of domestic abuse. And in April 2024, the Alabama State Bar officially announced a new policy. Every judge in the state will now be subject to independent annual psychological evaluations, and all courtroom interactions with unrepresented minors must be video recorded and audited. It was called the Aaliyah Law. On what would have been Jaden's 4th birthday, Monica stood alone on a hill in Elmwood Cemetery. The wind was soft. The sun filtered gently through the oak trees. She placed a toy giraffe beside his name, now carved into stone. She didn't cry. She smiled, because somewhere in the quiet, she heard her daughter's voice say, "You were right to believe me, Mama." And that, more than any verdict, was justice. If this story moved you as much as it moved us, don't forget to like, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel. We bring you real stories, raw, powerful, and unforgettable, every day. Justice deserves to be heard.